And welcome back to Love Your Food. This week we have a delicious Spanish-inspired recipe this week. This is a smoked trout salpicón. Now, this is sort of a traditional Spanish-style salad, typically with some kind of chopped meat in it, and we're using smoked trout in this one, and some roasted potatoes, and here are our ingredients. So here's our trout. We've got some beautiful hot smoked trout. We're going to use some potato, some red onion, a little bit of our homemade hot sauce, the juice from a lime, a little bit of cumin, some flat leaf parsley, some tomatoes, some capers, some celery, a little bit of olive oil, and some sherry vinegar. Actually, we're using some sherry balsamic vinegar for this recipe, and that's just part of the dressing. So, starting off with our potatoes, because we need to roast these, we are going to start them first. So, we're just going to slice these into panels. From there, we're going to slice it into sticks, and then we're just going to slice it into a pretty sizable dice. We want the texture in there. We don't want them to be huge pieces of potato because this is all sort of supposed to be kind of like a dip. So this salad is going to be really, really pleasant. We just want some smaller pieces in there. And that's about the size we're looking for. Get that really nice dice. And we're just going to pop that onto a baking sheet. Once we have done a little bit of seasoning. So we are going to toss it into a bowl. A little bit of salt and pepper on there. Now remember, these are potatoes, so they will take a fair amount of salt before they get too salty. They will absorb a lot of salt. Just give them a light toss. And then a little drizzle with some olive oil. And then that's going to go directly onto our baking sheet. Now we have it parchment lined so it doesn't stick or anything. And that goes into our preheated oven. So once everything's ready, that goes into our oven, and we will let that roast. We're going to let everything else sit for a little while before we get going. And then once you're seeing some color on those, some nice little roasty, toasty bits on there, these are ready to go. So we're just going to take those out and let them sit aside until they get back to room temperature. We want them to be cool to work with. Then we're going to toast our cumin seeds. So we're just going to put them in a dry little saucepan there over our induction burner and just let them warm up a little bit. Really awaken those flavors. Meanwhile, we're going to chop our flat leaf parsley. And we're just going to toss that into our bowl. Same thing with our celery. Now we want our celery to be pretty fine. We don't want big chunks of celery in there. Again, this is something that works sort of like a dip. So we want it to be fairly small pieces. So we're going to cut the celery into basically panels again, and then into really, really fine, thin slices. And those will join the parsley in the bowl. And the same with our red onion. Now we're only going to use about a quarter of this. And we're just going to do this in the style of real fine mince of this. So we're just going to very carefully cut most of the way through horizontally first. And then cut vertically with nice, thin, even slices. It helps to have an extremely sharp knife for this. And then we're going to cut that into this beautiful fine dice. Or mince, I should say. This is more of a mince. And that goes into our bowl with our other ingredients. Next is our capers, and you could toss these in whole, but you don't really want to. You want a little bit more spread on those, so you want them to spread throughout the dish. So we're just going to chop those up so we can get a little bit more of the flavor throughout the whole dish instead of like a big chunk of capers here and there. Then once your cumin is nice and toasty and you can really smell the aroma coming from it, we're just going to do that, hit that in the spice grinder until it is nice and finely ground. You can do this two ways. You can either add this into the dressing, or you can just add it directly to the salad as we did here. Now we have some tomatoes that got a little bit temperature mistreated, or actually they got a little overwatered, so they split open. These are from our garden. So we're just going to get rid of any sort of unsightly little woody parts of the outside of the tomato. And then, like all the other ingredients, we're going to cut this into panels. And nothing beats that beautiful, fresh, from the garden tomato. So we're going to cut that into panels, and then into sticks, and then from there into sort of a dice as well. And that's going to join everything else in our bowl. So here we have the beginnings of the salad. So we have all of our vegetables. We're going to add our now room temperature potatoes. So those are just going to get tossed in there as well. And they add a really fantastic texture to this dish. And now for the dressing, we're going to put our hot sauce. Now this is our homemade hot sauce. I'll put a link in the description below. I'll probably also try to put a card in for you. A little bit of our sherry balsamic vinegar. And you can use whatever type of vinegar you prefer. Sherry vinegar or red wine vinegar are fine. A little bit of lime juice. We tried to use the lime that we showed you in the beginning, but turns out it was completely dried out inside, so we had to use a little bit of canned lime juice. And a little bit of that olive oil. And then you just want to give that a stir. I mean, this is just basically a salad dressing, so we're just going to make sure that everything's well combined in there. And then we're going to chop up our smoked trout. So you can see this beautiful hot smoked trout. The flavor on this was fantastic. It's locally produced smoked trout. And you can use whatever you like for this. You can use this is a traditional dish. It's either meat or fish, and you could use a smoked salmon. You could even use some sort of canned fish or scallops or oysters, whatever you like. Yeah, just chop it up into pretty fine pieces. You can see we've got a big thing of trout here, and the flavor on this was so fantastic. Beautiful, smoky, quite oily fish. It was really delicious. And we're just going to toss all of that into our bowl with our vegetables and the potatoes. You can see how it's sticking to the board, how oily that trout was. It was really quite delicious. And from there, we're just going to add our dressing. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot, and if you feel like your dish is underdressed, we did actually feel like our dish was a little underdressed when we tasted it. We actually did a whole nother, we basically doubled our recipe for the dressing and put another whole iteration of that in here. So if you feel like it's a little underdressed, don't worry about dressing a little bit more. And then you just want to stir it until everything is well combined and everything comes together like this. And ideally, you want to do this well before you're going to serve it. You want to do this the day before or earlier in the day at least. It should sit a few hours at least before you serve it, because it really lets those flavors marry together, and you get a lot more flavor that way. So we're just going to give this a little taste test. As I said, we decided after tasting it that it wasn't quite dressed enough, so we added more of our dressing to it. And then into our container it goes, and we're just going to pop this into the fridge. And we let this sit for a few hours before we took it to actually a party. We had this for a birthday party. It was very popular. It's extremely delicious. And you just want to make sure that it all fits nicely into your container. And then we're just going to garnish this. We have a little bit of chopped green onion and some beautiful little olives. So we're just going to chop these olives pretty finely, and this is going to be a garnish for our dish. And again, you just want to make sure they're pretty small pieces, and this is just going to sit on top of your dish. So first goes our olives. And you could even garnish this with more capers if you wanted, but we had these beautiful olives that we really wanted to use. And on top of that, a little bit of that beautiful fresh green onion. This is actually leftover green onion from one of our previous recipes. This is from the beet dip, the beet hummus. And that's it. That's the whole thing. So really quite simple. There is a fair amount of chopping involved, but there's not a lot of cooking. You have to get those potatoes ready first, but nothing really complicated about this one, and so delicious. So again, this was beautiful smoked trout salpicón, and we hope you'll give this one a try. If you like this recipe, please do like and subscribe, and if you have any recipes you'd like to see Chef Caleb try on the channel, please let us know in the comments below. And remember to love your food.